I stayed loyal. They gave me silence, so I became it. There comes a moment when silence speaks louder than words, when staying becomes self-betrayal, when giving more only means losing yourself. I tried. I showed up, I loved hard, but they never saw my worth, so I did the one thing they never expected. I walked away. Ignored is worse than hated, because hatred still sees you. Hatred still acknowledges your existence. Even if someone hates you, you're still taking up space in their mind. But being ignored, that's emptiness. That's the slow rot. Being ignored means you're invisible to someone you gave your heart to. It means they walked past your pain like it was background noise, like your presence never mattered, like your voice was never loud enough to hold their attention. And the worst part, you stayed, hoping, waiting, telling yourself maybe they're just tired, maybe they're distracted, maybe tomorrow will be different, but it never was. And deep down you knew. You knew the silence wasn't accidental, it was chosen. Every unanswered message, every glance that looked through you instead of at you, every plan made without you, that's not forgetfulness, that's a decision. That's someone choosing to treat you like a shadow, and yet you stayed, because something in you thought maybe if you were just a little more patient, a little more understanding, a little more silent, maybe they'd see you again. But people who are blind to your worth don't suddenly open their eyes. They keep walking and they take pieces of you with them. You know what's cruel. It's not the insults, it's not the fights, it's the nothing. It's sitting next to someone and feeling alone. It's pouring yourself into someone who no longer even sees the cup. You become invisible, but only to them, not to yourself. That's the shift. That's where everything begins to burn, because after a while, silence isn't peaceful. It screams in your own chest. It echoes every time you try to explain the ache, and no one listens. It gets louder when you start to ask yourself if maybe you really are too much, or maybe not enough. That's what being ignored does. It makes you question the very core of who you are, and for what? For someone who wouldn't even notice if you vanished. They don't ignore you because you're worthless. They ignore you because they've become used to you. They've mistaken your consistency for weakness. Your presence became background noise to someone who never deserved your music. But here's what they don't understand. Silence has a limit. You can only take so much before the quiet starts to poison your spirit. And one day, something inside you snaps. It doesn't break, it hardens. You stop chasing, stop texting, stop showing up where you're not wanted. And not because you're angry, but because you're done bleeding for people who won't even offer you a bandage. You're done shrinking yourself to fit inside someone else's silence. And that's when you begin to heal, not loudly, not with fireworks, but in the quiet you used to dread. That same silence becomes your sanctuary, because now it's yours. You're not waiting anymore. You're rebuilding. That's when they notice, not with words, but with confusion, with sudden interest. With a hey, how have you been? Long after your soul packed up and left, but by then it's too late. You've already become someone they don't recognize, someone who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't wait to be seen, because you finally understood something simple and brutal. Attention is not love, presence is not affection. And being ignored isn't just painful, it's clarifying. It shows you exactly who's willing to lose you, so don't hate them. Don't try to force understanding into a place that never even offered you curiosity. Just walk, quietly, proudly, without noise, without closure, without the desperate need to be seen. Because the moment you walk away from where you're not valued, you step into the space where you start valuing yourself. And trust me, that's the loudest move you'll ever make. They heard your silence when you left. Loyalty to the wrong crowd drains power. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't feel it overnight. It happens in pieces, in sacrifices that feel small at first. Your time, your energy, your peace. You tell yourself it's nothing. Just being there for people, just being loyal, just holding on for the sake of history or hope or habit. But slowly it starts to bleed you, not because loyalty is wrong, but because some people only know how to take. You give your shoulder, they lean until your back breaks. You give your time, they steal your focus. You give your heart, they treat it like an open room with no door. And when you finally sit in silence, you start to realize you're always tired, always drained, not because life is hard, but because you're surrounded by the wrong crowd, people who celebrate your silence more than your strength. You keep showing up for people who would never cross the street for you. You stay available to those who vanish. The second your soul needs help, you offer loyalty like it's oxygen, and they treat it like background noise. But the truth is, not everyone deserves access to your loyalty. Some people only stick around because you're useful, not because you're loved. And when you're loyal to the wrong crowd, you start to forget who you are. You become the fixer, the listener, the helper, the one always holding others together while falling apart silently behind the scenes. You forget what it feels like to receive real care, real support, real presence. Your life becomes a service to everyone else's comfort, and in the process your own spirit begins to erode. They won't tell you to stop. Why would they? Your loyalty benefits them. It makes their lives easier. As long as you're carrying their weight, they won't complain. But the moment you shift, the moment you stop giving endlessly, suddenly you're the problem. Suddenly you're cold. Suddenly you're selfish. Not because you are, but because you stopped bleeding for people who never offered you a single drop. And that's when you see it for what it is. Not love, not family, not loyalty, just dependence. A one-sided transaction wrapped in guilt. They don't want you to grow. They want you to stay small, available, and quiet, because the moment you rise, the moment you reclaim your power, you're no longer theirs to drain. That's the thing about being loyal in the wrong places. It becomes a trap. It chains you to people who only love the version of you that bends, that waits, that stays silent to avoid confrontation. They don't want your truth. They want your silence. They don't want your strength. They want your servitude. And you keep thinking if you just give a little more, they'll change. If you just prove your heart enough times, they'll finally see it. But they already see it. That's why they stay. Not because they love it, but because they know how much they can take before you break. You can't build a life around people who only show up when it's easy. You can't grow if your energy is constantly drained by empty hands, and you will never feel peace if you keep shrinking to fit places your soul has outgrown. Your loyalty is sacred, it's powerful, and when it's given to the right people, it builds empires, but given to the wrong ones, it builds cages. Cages made of guilt, cages built on history, cages that look like love but feel like suffocation, and the longer you stay, the harder it is to breathe. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the people you once swore you'd never leave. Not because you hate them, not because you don't care, but because you finally realized your loyalty was never meant to be a life sentence. It was a gift, and it's okay to take it back. They'll call it betrayal. They'll call it abandonment, but you'll know the truth. You didn't leave them. You returned to yourself, because loyalty is only noble when it doesn't come at the cost of your soul. Walking away isn't weakness, it's revenge. But most people won't understand that. They've been taught to believe that staying is strength, that fighting for your place in someone's life proves your worth. That if you walk, it means you lost. It means you gave up. But there's nothing strong about begging to be seen. There's no power in chasing someone who's already decided your presence is optional. The truth is, the real strength is in the silence, in the decision to get up and leave without yelling, without warning, without trying to explain your worth one more time to people who were never listening in the first place. You don't owe them a scene. You don't owe them a breakdown. Just distance, and that distance will do more damage than your words ever could, because the loudest revenge is peace, the kind of peace that doesn't need closure, the kind that doesn't beg for understanding, the kind that doesn't announce its exit, it just vanishes, and when they look up and realize you're gone, when they search for the chaos they used to feed off of and find only silence, that's when they feel it. That's when your absence becomes a mirror. See when you stay and fight. They still believe they own space in your mind. They still feel like they have power, that they can hurt you, ignore you, and still be chased. But when you walk away, not in rage, not in tears, just gone, that's when the story shifts. That's when they start to panic. Not because they miss you, But because they lost control, you weren't supposed to leave. You were supposed to stay and explain yourself. You were supposed to stay and keep trying. You were supposed to stay and suffer quietly so they could stay comfortable. But you didn't. You chose yourself. You chose to stop being a background character in someone else's life and start showing up in your own. And that's the kind of revenge they never see coming, because people are prepared for drama. They're prepared for arguments, for begging, for tears, but they're not prepared for indifference. They're not prepared for your silence. They're not prepared to be erased, and when you walk, you erase them, not just from your path, but from your energy, your time, your mind. It's not about punishing them. It's about freeing yourself from the need to be understood, from the habit of proving your worth to people who only see you when they need something, from the addiction to toxic loyalty that convinces you that staying in pain makes you noble. It doesn't. It just makes you smaller. You don't win by staying in rooms where your soul is dying. You don't win by lowering your standards just to hold on to people who never saw your value in the first place. You win by walking out and not looking back. You win by leaving questions unanswered. You win by letting them wonder why you stopped showing up, why the energy changed, why your name became distant. That silence will haunt them. They thought you'd never leave. They built comfort on your pain, but comfort breeds carelessness. They got used to you showing up, no matter how they treated you. They thought your love was endless, that your presence was permanent. So when you disappear, they feel it in the empty spaces you used to fill, and it burns, because now there's no one to call at 2 a.m., no one to vent to, no one to carry the emotional weight, no one to answer with understanding when they show up days late with shallow apologies. You're gone, and nothing screams louder than the absence of someone who used to care. So don't ever let someone convince you that walking away is weakness. Weakness is staying where you're not wanted. Weakness is pretending you're okay with being treated like an afterthought. Weakness is giving second, third, fourth chances to people who never even gave you one. But walking away, that's power, that's control. That's revenge without the poison. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to get even. You just need to get gone. And when you do, when you finally close the door, not out of anger but out of clarity, that's when everything changes, not for them, for you. Because nothing is more terrifying to someone who took you for granted than realizing you're not coming back. Not everyone deserves access to you. That's something you only learn after you've been drained too many times, after you've opened your heart, your time, your space, and your loyalty to people who only came to take. At first, it feels good to be needed, to be wanted, to be chosen. But you start to notice something. Every time you pour into others, you're left emptier. Every time you give without boundaries, you're the one picking up the pieces of yourself afterward. Because not everyone who smiles at you deserves a seat at your table. Some people come with hunger, not love. Hunger for your energy, your support, your light, and they'll take it all, leaving you cold in a room you used to fill with warmth. They'll smile while they drain you, and you won't even see it happening, not right away. You'll mistake their need for connection. You'll confuse their presence with intention. You'll believe that because you opened your arms, they'll hold you with care. But people don't always honor what they're given. Sometimes they only value what they have to earn, and when you make yourself available to the wrong ones, they forget your worth. Not everyone deserves access to your peace, to your thoughts, to your vulnerability. Some people see your openness as weakness. They take your kindness as a signal to exploit. They don't come to give, they come to consume, and when you're finally exhausted, when you finally say enough, they'll look confused because they never thought your light would dim. They never thought you'd stop answering. You've got to understand something. Your presence is power. Who you are, what you carry, the energy you bring into a room, the way you listen, the way you love, it's rare. But when you offer it freely to everyone, it starts to lose meaning, and it starts to attract those who only want to use it. You have to protect it. You have to stop letting just anyone walk in and out of your heart like it's a hotel. Some people are guests. Some people are thieves. And the only way to know the difference is to watch who stays when you stop giving, who still shows up when your hands are empty, because real connection isn't about what you provide, it's about who values you when you have nothing to offer but truth. When you stop performing, when you stop fixing, when you stop giving just to prove you're worthy, that's when you find out who truly deserves you. You were never meant to be accessible to everyone, not because you're arrogant, not because you're selfish, but because you finally learned that your soul is expensive, and the ones who deserve access are the ones who treat it with respect, not convenience. Start observing how people respond to your boundaries. Watch what happens when you stop overextending. Do they get angry? Do they guilt you? Do they vanish? Good. Let them, because the ones who leave when you protect yourself were only there to feed off what you didn't protect. You don't owe everyone a yes. You don't owe everyone your story. You don't owe everyone your attention. It's okay to be selective. It's okay to keep your circle small. In fact, it's necessary because energy is currency. And not everyone deserves a piece of your peace. The more you grow, the quieter you become. The more you heal, the less you tolerate chaos disguised as love. You stop chasing people. You stop over-explaining. You stop begging to be understood. You let people think what they want. You let them assume, because you're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're here to protect it. And it's not cold. It's not bitter. It's not vengeful. It's clarity. It's knowing that access to you is a privilege, not a guarantee. And if someone doesn't know how to value that, they don't belong in your life, not now, not ever. So be kind, be generous, be open, but be selective. Your energy is sacred. Your soul is not for everyone. And when you finally realize that, you stop breaking yourself to be available for people who were never meant to stay. Loneliness is cleaner than disrespect. But it takes time to see it that way, because at first, loneliness feels heavy. It feels like silence that wraps around your chest and makes it hard to breathe. You miss the noise, even if that noise came from people who didn't treat you right. You miss the conversations, even if they were one-sided. You miss the presence of others, even if their presence made you feel small. That's the trap. We confuse company with comfort, even when that company slowly poisons us. It's easy to think that being around people, even toxic ones, is better than being alone. We lie to ourselves and call it strength. We say, at least I'm not by myself. But you are. You can be surrounded by people and still feel invisible. You can be in a crowded room and feel like no one really sees you, because being near others isn't the same as being known. And sometimes that fake closeness hurts more than actual distance. There's a moment you wake up to the truth that the real wound doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being with people who make you question your worth, from conversations that drain you, from smiles that hide intentions, from relationships that demand your silence just to keep the peace. And when you've lived in that for long enough, you start to crave quiet, not because you love loneliness, but because it finally feels honest. Loneliness won't lie to you. It won't pretend to care. It won't fake apologies or offer comfort just to keep you stuck. It's raw. It's real, and it forces you to face yourself, something disrespectful people never let you do. Because when you're constantly bending to be accepted, constantly shrinking to avoid conflict, constantly second-guessing your value just to keep someone from walking away, you lose the parts of yourself that were meant to shine. Disrespect doesn't always come in loud, obvious ways. Sometimes it comes in the little things: being ignored, being talked over, being the last thought instead of the first, being told you're too sensitive when all you did was express how you feel. It's subtle. It chips away at you, and every time you allow it, you teach yourself that it's okay, that this is what you deserve, that maybe if you just tolerate a little more, it'll get better. But it doesn't. It never does. And the truth is, it's better to sit alone with your dignity than to share space with people who make you feel unworthy. Loneliness, when you embrace it, becomes a mirror. It shows you the places where you gave too much, where you allowed too little. It forces you to rebuild without applause, without validation, without anyone clapping for your strength. And that's where the healing begins. Because when you stop settling for half-hearted love, when you stop allowing people to disrespect you just so you don't have to sit with your own thoughts, you start to understand your power. You realize you don't need to chase connection. You need to protect your peace. It's hard at first. The silence feels brutal. You'll reach for your phone, you'll scroll through old messages, you'll wonder if maybe you were too harsh, too distant, too cold, but keep going, stay in the silence, let it wash over you, because eventually it won't feel empty anymore, it'll feel safe. That's when clarity comes. That's when you realize that you were never hard to love. You were just loving people who didn't know how to handle real love. You were never too much, you were just too honest for people who preferred masks. And once you see that, you stop settling. You stop answering calls from people who only think of you when they're lonely. You stop showing up for people who never meet you halfway. You choose yourself fully, quietly, without drama, without needing to explain why, because you know what disrespect feels like now, and you know that anything, even silence, is better than that. So don't fear being alone. Fear losing yourself while trying to be loved by people who never deserved you. Fear staying in places that force you to abandon your own voice. Fear choosing noise over peace, because at the end of the day, loneliness is just a season, but disrespect, that's it. Slow death, and you owe yourself more than that. Your silence will haunt their memory, not because you intended to cause pain, not because you sought revenge, but because silence is the one thing people never expect from the ones they took for granted. They expect the arguments, they expect long texts, they expect the late night calls where you try to explain your worth one more time. They expect you to come back again and again and again. What they never prepare for is the day you don't say anything at all, the day you stop fighting, the day your name disappears from their notifications. At first they might laugh, shrug it off, tell themselves you'll be back like always, that it's just one of your moods. They've seen you hurt, but they've also seen you return. So they don't take your absence seriously, not yet, because they never truly believed you'd ever choose peace over them. They didn't see your silence as strength. They saw it as temporary, but silence has a way of settling in deep. It becomes louder than any scream once it sinks into the spaces they used to fill with your name. You don't need to announce your exit. You don't need a final speech. When you've been ignored, overlooked, or manipulated for long enough, the most powerful thing you can do is stop responding, stop explaining, stop proving, because when someone can't hear your voice while you're present, they'll be forced to feel your absence when you're gone, and that absence lingers. It shows up in the little things, in the song you used to play, in the time of day you used to call, in the quiet moments when they expect your voice and find only space. That's when the weight of what they lost starts to settle in. Not because they loved you right, but because they never expected to lose your presence completely. People remember the ones who stay too long, but they never forget the ones who leave without a sound. Your silence becomes a question they can't answer, a memory they can't mute, a regret they never saw coming, and the truth is, you never had to raise your voice. Be heard, you just had to leave. They'll wonder why. They'll play back every moment, every word, looking for signs they missed. But they didn't miss the signs, they ignored them. They knew what they were doing. They just never thought it would cost them you. That's what makes silence so powerful. It doesn't beg, it doesn't plead, it just exists, and in that existence it reminds them of everything they took for granted. Silence is the mirror they can't escape. It reflects their carelessness, their selfishness, their entitlement. It's not just about what you don't say, it's about what they can't unfeel, and they will feel it in the empty inbox, in the unreturned messages, in the realization that the one person who always showed up no longer does. The beautiful thing about silence is that it's not about revenge, it's about release. It's the final act of self-respect, the quiet boundary that says, I don't need to be here anymore. And once you set that boundary, your energy shifts, your peace expands, and they're left with the echo of everything they thought would always be available. They'll start remembering things they never noticed before. The way you always checked in, the way you forgave without hesitation, the way you stayed even when you were hurting, and now that you're no longer there, those memories become ghosts, quiet but heavy. That's how your silence haunts, not through anger, not through cruelty, but through the calm, quiet decision to value yourself more than their comfort. It's in the way you disappear, not to punish but to heal, and in doing so, you leave behind a void they can't fill, because no one replaces someone who gave love like you did. So don't feel guilty for walking away without a speech. Don't question if you should have explained one more time. You gave enough. You stayed long enough. You were loud in your love, and they ignored the sound. Now let your silence speak. Let it echo. Let it live in their memory, because some lessons can't be taught with words. They can only be learned through the quiet aftermath of your absence. And when they finally sit alone with everything they didn't appreciate, they'll realize the truth they never saw coming. Your silence said everything. They laughed when I went quiet, thought my silence meant surrender, thought I'd come back like always, apologizing for caring too much. But this time, I didn't. This time, I chose something different. I chose to stand alone, because walking with people who don't value me isn't strength, it's self-destruction, and I've destroyed enough of myself trying to stay loyal to those who only showed up when it was easy. They called it weakness when I walked away, but I wasn't running, I was releasing. Leaving wasn't defeat. It was the revenge they never saw coming, because the real sting isn't in raised voices. It's in the silence of someone who finally got tired of being ignored. I stopped giving access to people who couldn't handle the weight of who I am. No more discounts, no more explaining. Not everyone deserves a seat at my table, especially those who only show up when they're hungry, never when I'm hurting. I chose loneliness over disrespect, because I'd rather sit in silence with my dignity than keep sharing space with those who made me question it. And now I say nothing at all, because my silence will echo longer than my presence ever did. Let them wonder. Let them replay the moments they thought didn't matter. Let them feel the absence they never thought would come. This isn't bitterness. This is peace, and I've made peace with knowing they didn't see my worth, so I walked away and I never looked back. Goodbye.